All right, welcome to SAS Bites. This is episode 47, Putting Susie to Work. She is old enough, it's not child labor. We're good to go. Horrible joke to start off the episode. So I am Micah Godbolt, bringer of horrible jokes. You can follow me down there at Micah Godbolt. You can follow SAS Bites at SAS Bites on Twitter, as well as catch up on previous episodes at youtube.com//SAS Bites. Catch all of our previous episodes there. So last week we spent a little bit of time looking over Susie grids and all of the different settings that can go into just a single grid. We spent an entire 20 minutes trying to go through each of those settings to talk about what you can do about static grids versus flexible grids and isolate versus floats and all those kind of things. So today we're going to put that aside. We're going to make some assumptions as to what the grid layout's going to be, and we're going to actually set up, use that grid and grid spans to actually lay something out. We're going to keep it relatively simple because we're going to do basically like a whole page. And then probably the next couple weeks, I'm going to go back and start looking at some of the more kind of specific special use cases, functions and mixins and those kind of things. So if you're like, hey, why didn't you use such and such there? It's because I'm saving it. I gotta save something for next week. So let's go ahead and jump over here. All right. First thing you see is I have this thing about pandas. I don't know why. Pandas came up, and I decided to do a website about pandas. So as you can see, we've got our logo, our big nasty logo, nasty, big, huge logo. Our slogan, Pandas R Us, a little bit of navigation. We've got some content here. We've got content with media, and then we've got a big gallery. And I was a little too lazy to get lots of different photos, so here's like this photo like 7 or 8 times. We're gonna do a little gallery with that. And then the bottom we've got kind of our big fat footer with a bunch of links, a bunch of social media icons, which obviously we'd use more than just Twitter, unless we had lots of Twitter accounts. And because it's pandas, we need a little bit of PvP in here. And so there we go. So this is markup. If you take a look at the markup, this is just kind of our standard markup with just using semantic headers and navs and classes and those types of things. Nothing fancy about this markup whatsoever. There's obviously no row classes. There's no container classes. There's nothing in this markup that tells us anything about the layout, structure, or look. So that's the way we like it. That means we can go through it with Susie and turn it into the layout that we want to have. So let's take a quick look at our setup with our config file here. I've used a similar grid as to what we were doing last week. And let me bring this down even a little bit. Oh, I don't have anything on there yet. Anyway, so about 800, 900. I put it smaller just so you can actually see it in this. And thank you, notifications. Okay, so we've got kind of a basic grid going here, and I can probably show here. I can show that grid, and it should show. It's going. Yep. Oh, it's probably not going yet because I don't have a container on. Okay, let's move through this to get to places that actually stuff does work. And you can also see. So here's my base Susie grid. That's basically the base grid. All these other grids will be basically dependent on this, so only things that will change are the things that I specify have changed. So here's 3 other grids I'm going to be using. I'm going to be using a gallery grid, using a nav layout, and I'm going to use the golden layout. And if you're familiar with these numbers, 1.618 is the golden ratio, or at least part of it. I didn't go too many decimal points. I could certainly go more. Basic golden ratio is that this one plus this one is equal to that one, which you can actually see is pretty obvious there. And then this one plus this one would be the next one in the row, and so on and so forth. I just wanted to show how you could do an asymmetric grid. That's exactly it right there. So I've got a few different grids I want to use, and we're going to lay this whole thing out. And to avoid the parade of elephants thundering through my microphone, I'm not going to type all this out. I just have commented things out. So let's go through and let's talk about how I'm using these different mixins and a couple functions to lay this page out. So first thing is we have this page wrapper that goes around the whole thing. You don't have to do it this way. It's kind of just a simple convention that a lot of people will use. So let's go ahead and throw the page wrapper on it. And what that's going to do is, if I get this small enough, hey, there we go, 700. Let's go 750. use that space. So you can see our page wrapper uses that container size and brings it in, gives it a max width, and sets the margins to auto left and right, so it's centered and all those kind of good things. So the next thing we've got our header that has the logo and has a company name. So the first thing you can see here is this include full. And this is a nice little function. We don't necessarily always have to use this, but if you've ever worked with a lot of float layouts, and floats layouts where stuff inside some of the layouts have margins and paddings, weird stuff can happen if everything isn't floated. So like here's our header, the header which goes 100% across here. Right now it's just a block element. It's just setting up their block, nothing specific. It can get a little funky if that block element isn't actually floated just like a 100% item. So and let's take a look at that real quick. Let's see what that actually means. And I wish I could set up a demo, but if you've done much of it, you'd be like, oh, why is this margin padding adding weird stuff? And you just add a float and it works. So so right now our header is just display block. That's all it's doing. But when I add this include full to it, what it's going to do is it's going to clear everything, which is great. So it makes sure that floats above it don't accidentally pull it around. It's going to give it a width 100%. It's going to float it left and set 0 margins. Now again, our body has the margins on it, so it doesn't affect any of that. So it's a good way to kind of reset everything to make sure it's floated, to make sure things are contained. Puts the clears on there. If you're having some weird issues with stuff like with extra gaps and stuff like that, include full or just floating it is usually will fix a lot of that. So that's what we did there. Let's move on to the next element, and this actually works pretty well. Oh, actually, one thing I want to do. I know this is a talk about layouts, but there's a couple things I wanted to change style-wise before I do the layout, just to make life a little bit easier. For one, I am going to turn on my box sizing. my border box. I'm also going to turn on image being width of 100% and height of auto. I had that off at the beginning because it makes the images huge on this page until we start doing layout. But it's going to make things a lot easier when we start doing grids, because it'll make sure that all those images are contained to their grid element. I did this real quick for my navigation, just so I can zero out some of those styles, and just some real basic styles on the navigation, just so I can kind of demo some of that. So this is certainly not necessary. Really, this image is really the main one that's necessary, and border box if you're going to use it. These are really the ones that are necessary for the grid. The other ones are kind of decorative, just for examples. All right, so speaking of logo, so what we're going to do is we're going to take our logo and we're going to apply a span of 3 on it. So a couple things here. Span of 3, what exactly does that mean? A span of 3 means that it is going to be 3 columns wide, and the question is always, okay, 3 out of how many? Well, if we go back to our columns here set, we're setting to a 12-column default. So it means 3 of 12, or around 25%. And you can see here that it's put it at 23.4 with a margin of 2.1. Now again, this is the crazy math that Suzy does for you so that you don't have to. Because when you use these margin floats, the width plus the margin needs to equal that 25%, and that kind of math is stupid, and you don't want to be doing that every time you make a small adjustment. So if I wanted that to actually be a little smaller, I could do a span of 2, and it's smaller. If I want to do a span of 4, I don't think that'll break it. Yeah. So we're going to leave it at 3. So that's the size that we want. That image automatically, since it has that width of 100%, height of auto, will automatically restrain to that column, which is awesome. It's a really great way to set image sizes so they just fit inside of their containers. All right, so this next one we're going to do is the company name, which is on the right there. And a couple tidbits about this. I've got last in there because, let me do without last first. All right, so that does the grid, and don't worry about the navigation behind it. It pulled up because, let's do this. Let's just hide that for now. It pulled up because the other thing floated out of its way. So what's happening now is we've got a span of 3, then a span of 7. Now notice that only equals to 10, and that doesn't matter because right now they're just floated the image, and then this guy's floated right next to it, just like that. But that's not actually what we want from our design. We want our company name to only be a span of 7, but we want it to be all the way to the right. Now there's a couple ways to actually do this. One of them being, I think it's, I remember the mix of name. It's like push or pull. You can do those kind of things. But right now, we're just going to do something really simple. We're going to use the last keyword. And what that means is it's going to put it at the end. And in this case, what it actually means, it's going to do a float of right. So that's one way that we can kind of make something a little smaller and throw it over to one side, is by using that last command. So that's what we're going to do there. Let's go ahead and take this off. So we have our navigation again. So as you can see here, and let me do some of this. One thing you'll notice here is that if we try and do this, it ends up next to the panda. What's up with that? That's not what we want. That's not where we want our navigation to be. And that's where this include full comes in handy, because remember, that'll clear things. That'll set width 100%. That kind of like is our. It's kind of like a container class in other realms. Yeah, that's basically that. So it kind of will set things and pull them down. So what's happening here is I've got navigation that has 4 items. And I want each item to be 1/4 of the page, or 3 span elements. But there's a couple problems. For one, they all have margin rights. So there's going to be an issue of the last one not fitting into there. The other thing is that they have gutters, and I actually don't want gutters in this case. Just design-wise, I want them all to be right next to each other. So when you hover over them, there's no gap there. And I have a cat in the back sneezing. My apologies. So what I'm going to be able to do is I've got this other layout. I've got this nav layout. And let's take a quick look at it. It's 12 columns, has 0 gutter, and it is actually, this doesn't really matter. I've got the gutter on the inside, but it's got no gutter, so it really doesn't matter. If I did have a gutter, it'd be on the inside. So what I can do is 3 of the nav layout. Yeah, okay. I remember the right terminology. So 3 of, and you can pass in that variable for the layout. And what that means, it'll be 3 columns of this layout. So that layout's 12 columns. It doesn't have any gutter. So now what you can see here is these have no gutter in between them, which obviously means this last one doesn't fall down below. And we have a nice navigation right here. The advantage here is it means that we don't have to do anything crazy or fancy to be able to use multiple different layouts. So if we have a layout that we need to use for one instance and a different layout for a different instance, we don't have to break our system or throw a bunch of hacks in there to make it work. They're using completely independent variables and logic and configuration to create each one of those. All right, so let's go ahead and move down. We've got this little hero element here, which is going to be a set of text. Let's go ahead and include full that. You're not going to see any huge change there. Okay, this why we love part, that's going to be a span of 5. That's going to go on the left. So that's going to go there. That's great. And then we've got these 3 parts here. We've got about pandas, which is this part on the right. So we're going to do a last of 7 just to give it some space to make sure that everything's moved over. The reason being, and actually let me go ahead and show this here, is that if I don't do this last of 7 and actually move the entire thing over, let's see, hero, yeah, this about pandas, you see, it doesn't actually get floated over. It's just that element on the left pushes over anything that's next to it. So the stuff falling down below. So that's one of the reasons we definitely want to move that over. So let's do that. And now you can see everything gets pushed over, and it's everything within that about pandas is span of last 7. Again, we use that last so that we know it's the last elements in the row, and it takes off that margin right. All right, so we've got a few different items in here. We've got in the wild, in the zoo, in the media, and let's go ahead and do some layout with that. In the wild and in the zoo, we're going to just do a little 3-4 layout. So this will be 3, this will be 4. Obviously, we probably want to shrink those titles eventually. And then this item below, we actually want to have as another element kind of down below it. We want it to be 100%. So we could do an include full here if we wanted to, and it would give it 100% width and all of that. But here's another little trick. We've talked about context, and actually let me jump up here real quick, talk about context. We're saying span 3 of 7 because the block that it's inside of, the container that's inside of, this about pandas, is only 7 wide. And so to maintain that gutter size, we want to make sure we say 3 of 7. Because I could say, I could say 3 I could say 3 and 4 here, but it would be out of the 12 context, which would give us the wrong percentages. I could say like 6 and 6, which would give us 50%, 50%, but then that would give us a different size gutter in the middle. So to keep our contexts all in check, we want to be using this like 3 of 7 if it's inside of something. So what I'm showing here is I'm going to use a span 7 of 7 because I want this to be 100% going across here, this in the media. And let's save that. Here we go. Oh, and I need to, there we go. Gotta undo that one as well. Okay, so now this is 100% going across. And then the elements inside of it also need to be, of 7 and of 7. But what I can do is I can put those elements inside of this include. Because remember, these are actually includes, and includes can have content. So I can actually pass selectors and their grids into that content. Actually, I just found this earlier today. I was like, that's cool. All right. So instead of having to do of 7, of 7, those kind of things, I can just put it inside of that span, and it's going to know that it's 2 of 7 and the last 5 of 7. Okay, sorry. I saw this. I was like, what happened? Oh, no, it's this one up here. So you can see the image is going to be a 2 of 7, and the copy is going to be 5 of 7. So we can automatically do that by putting that inside of this span include right here. We could do it outside. Let me just copy this out. We could put it here, but I would have to say of 7 and last 5 of 7. And that would be the exact same thing. Thank you, Jenkins. Here, I will close that. There we go. All right. And it will give you the exact same thing. So that's just one shortcut. If you want to kind of keep things in context, if you're already needing to nest a couple things, you can actually you can do that. Which is, for one, if you end up for some reason changing this, it'll inherit down to its siblings, or sorry, its children. It also just it's good organization, and it's kind of a cool way to do it. All right, so we've got that set up. So we've got a couple of couple of rows here. We've got some nested rows. We've got nested rows inside of nested rows. We're using our columns to actually size this media. So this image is going to be exactly 2 columns wide, which is great, especially when you have a square image. Actually, probably could have thrown a square image in there instead. And actually, let me just do that. Let's take here's the source here of, it's a social link. This random animal here, let's put it up here. Makes a lot more sense when it's an actual square image, so that you can see that it actually lines up with those columns. Let's turn our show. There we go. So you can see that it actually is going to line up with those columns once they get lined up. Yeah, over there. So I remember that's not extremely accurate, but it gives you an idea. So it's going to line up with those columns. So moving on, let's look at what we have down here. We have got our Panda gallery, and in this we've just got a bunch of divs that have images inside of them. Actually, I don't remember why I put them in divs. You can maybe put titles on them or something. So one thing we can actually do, let's go ahead and put this full in. So again, our Panda gallery just has that kind of that reset and that clear around it. One thing we can actually do, we could use the span concept and just do span of and use some nth child to set those. And I guess I probably could show that sometime, maybe next week. But Suzy comes with this really nice little gallery, include gallery. And let me actually comment this out so we can see without that. All right, so we can include gallery. And this gallery is 4. It's basically how many columns it's going to take up. And since our default columns is 12, it's going to be 4 of 12, so it's 1/3. So you can see it automatically creates a gallery layout where we have 3, and it makes sure that there's no of the extra gutter, so it has the nth child in there, and it actually defaults to using isolate layout. Not 100% sure of the reason that they decided to do this. Maybe it just works better for galleries, or maybe it allows it to be more flexible. I'm not quite sure, but they did. So it automatically uses isolate and lays it all out for you. I did one other thing here, just a quick little kind of fun thing you can do with some of the functions in SUSY. I'm using gutter to call a gutter value. So in this context, how big is a gutter? And you can tell by clicking on one that the gutter is margin bottom is 2.127. So what I can do is I can make sure that the gutter, this bottom gutter, is going to be the same size as the space between the two. And that's just a fun little trick that I found recently. So one other thing is we want to do a different layout again for the Panda Gallery. So I want to show here is a different way that we can do different layouts. In this, we actually said 3 of nav layout. And in this case, I have multiple items that I want to have in a different layout. So to do that, there's actually a with layout mixin, and we're going to pass everything into that mixin, and also pass in for the parameter the name of the gallery, or sorry, the name of the layout that we're using. All right, and it's not a big difference, but the layout I'm using has a different. It's a different gutter. You can do different stuff if you wanted to, but I just want to show a little different. I want a smaller gutter here, so so it has those gutters. What I could do is maybe have a have the smaller gutter, but also have, here we are, after have the gutter inside, because maybe you want those images off the edges of your site. Maybe you have like a color background or something. You want those in. So you see they got pulled in a little bit, and there's now gutter around everything. Which also means that this math actually breaks, because our gutter is now twice the size. Anyway, we can tweak that later. All right, so let's go back to after. So that's one other way that you can invoke a different layout, is using our with layout, and then pass in the name of it. And since it's an include, or it's a mixin, we can pass content inside of it. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at our last one here, because we've been going for, wow, a good bit of time. So let's definitely wrap this up. What we're going to do is we're going to do an asymmetric layout in this last one. And let's just go ahead and undo all of these first 3. Here we go. Yes, all right. And this is just showing that you don't have to have equal size columns. We can actually set 3 different columns of different lengths, and you can see if I change the size of this column, everything's going to shift. There's going to be more weight on that one and less weight on the others. There we go. Or if we want this first one to be really large and the other ones to be smaller, we can do that. So it just means we have 3 columns, and each column has a different size to it. So when we're calling them, since we only have 3 columns, we just say 1, and then we need to stay at what position, because they're all different. So we have to know, like, if it's a column at position 2, it's going to be a different size than if it's a column at position 1. So for our Panda links, we're just going to span 1 at 1. So that's going to be span 1 at that 1 size. For our Panda social, we're going to do 1 at 2, and then we're going to do 1 at 3 for the last one. The other point of this is you could do 2. Say if we want to display none on this, we could actually say 2 at 2, and it would add up the first 2 of that. You see, our PVP didn't move at all. So that first one is now the first column plus the second column, whatever combination that is, which I'm sure is just a crazy number that I don't even want to imagine. You can do with these asymmetric grids, you can do multiple columns like that. But you do have to say where is it starting, so it knows which columns to add up. All right, so let's take this off. And okay, this next one I'm going to show is that we don't always have to specify our alternative grids, our alternative grids in a different variable and then include them. We can actually just say 6 of 12, but I want it to be 1 and inside, so the gutter's inside. So a different gutter, and if I want to, so that's 6 of 12. I mean, I could say, like, 3 of 6 if I wanted to, and pass in really any kind of grid that you want to do, whether it's 1 or we have big, huge gutters or little gutters. We can pass all that information into that span versus having to put it in a variable and bring that in. So 3 of, and then here's our grid. All right. And lastly, we don't even have to use columns. We don't have to specify, something of a column. We can actually do just percentages. So here, I'm going to say span 50%. And actually, I can take that off. I needed to do that. I needed to put this in a grid that had no gutter, because it still applies a gutter to it if your parent has, if your base grid has a gutter, it's still going to add a gutter to it. It's going to be 50% plus a gutter. So let me actually take that off, and let me show you. You can just do like 40%. 50% would make it too large, because it'd be 50% plus the, there we go. Maybe 50% plus that margin, which would bump the next one down. So anyway, so you can pass in percentages. You can pass in, heck, I think you might get crazy. You can even pass in pixel values. Suzy is extremely flexible about what you pass into this span mixin, whether it be the size, whether it be the number of gutters, number of columns, whether you pass in like context, like some other layout. There's a lot of stuff you can do. You can pass in just the word last or omega if you're used to omega. It's pretty great. It really allows you to make a layout really easily. This is a full web page layout. This obviously needs more styles, but everything in this page is already laid out exactly the way that you need to theme it and be done with this page, which is great, because it also means that you have all of your styles separated out. You can come back through with another pass of just like decorative, just the fonts and the colors and decorations of stuff, and all of your left to right sizing and margins and patterning and gutters is all handled through the layout. So that's using Suzy. That is laying out an entire web page in less than 83 lines of code. Actually, a lot less. I can take that out. And extremely powerful and flexible. If I need to come back in here and say, we really need to change our gutter sizes to be much bigger. We need huge gutters. We can just change that right there, and every single thing that uses that layout is going to change its gutter size. The images are going to get smaller. These gutters are going to get larger. This is not going to change because it uses a different layout. But it gives you that flexibility to easily make changes to your system without having to go back and recalculate a whole bunch of stuff. And that is a wonderful thing when you have a very large, complex website. So thank you, everyone, for sticking around. I see we've got like 10 people watching, which is awesome. It was a bit of a longer episode because there's just so much to share. And this is, as I tweeted out earlier today, the tip of the iceberg as far as what Suzy provides for you in making these custom layouts. Because the goal is to, basically, I never want to write a margin left of 20 pixels because I got to shove something over. What we should be able to do is use Suzy for every single left to right movement. Have all of our layout contained to say any left and right gutters, movement, padding, anything is all going to be layout, and none of that's going to be in our styles. So we're going to talk about that next week, about some of those other functions and other mixins and other little specialty things that we have in our arsenal, or in our toolkit, I think actually Suzy calls it, that's going to allow us to do all those things without resorting to static hacks. Which we definitely want to avoid because that breaks really easily. So thank you, everyone, for sticking around. Thanks for Eric Suzanne for making awesome Suzy, and for Suzy, and for the SAS community. You guys are awesome. So enjoy. Tweet your questions at me if you got questions about how this goes. I'm going to try and put this on a SAS Meister so you can start poking around on it and see what I did. I'll try and get that tweet out later today. So follow me at Micah Godbold or at SAS Bytes, and you'll get a chance to see that. So thanks again. Catch you next week.